Oh, that is.
It looks like
fun.
it's becoming engorged with Halloween spirit. Like,
or I'm reenacting a scene from Airplane. I don't know which.
yeah, that's Satan is my co-pilot. Let me fill this cup up just as well, not fill it up, but let me top it off just a second.
Welcome to another episode of Based on a True Story. My name is Matthew Baxter.
I'm Karen Stolzner.
And I'm Blake Smith. And today we're going to look at the film, The Mothman Prophecies. It's a 2002 movie based on the book by the same name. This is written by a guest who's been on the show before, Rich Haddam. The film is, the book is written by John Keel. And
Who has not been on this show.
He's not. He's interesting character.
Not been alive for a while.
He has passed on to the next phase in his existence, whatever that turns out to be. I have my ideas, but bless his heart.
We should mention too that this is based on a true story with Monstertalk. So
that's right. That's right. Exactly.
Forgot to mention our
Monster House production. So
that's right. Yeah. Monster House LLC. And if you enjoy this, check out our other stuff on our channel. YouTube is youtube.com/Monstertalk. And
like and subscribe.
That's right. And we have a podcast at monstertalk.org. You can find the links there, or you can find it in any of your podcast aggregators. Yeah. And this is kind of a fun one. So
other shows on this channel as well, like Matt's show, Ask a Paranormal Investigator, and more fun stuff coming up too.
That's right. But this is part of a series we're doing called Based on a True Story, where we look at films that are based on allegedly true stories and kind of look at how the fictional versions compare or contrast with the events that actually took place. And this one's a complicated one because it's a movie based on a book that's kind of a fictionalized version of real events that took place in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 1967. So I think we should talk about the film first. Yeah, a series of events, right?
Yeah, well, they start off, with that nice intro that says, this film is based on actual events that occurred between blah, blah,
That's
blah.
right.
So it's really, I know that the director regrets the way he said that. He says that, well, maybe we should have said inspired
by
and probably things like that. But yeah, instead of based on actual events that occurred, that is stretching.
It is. And I think, again, it's important to point out that this is a movie based on a book that was kind of a semi-fictionalized version of the real events. People who were contemporary with Keel, his colleagues, have said that what he did in his approach is very much like what Truman Capote did in Cold Blood, which is it's a real story about real crime, but it also has elements that were like fictionalized or novelized or however you want to put it to give it, to make it more fun to read. I'm not sure how you put it, but the way that things are constructed in the book are not literally 100% factual from what actually happened. Although many of the things that happened there were documented in newspapers and other things. So, I don't think Keel was just making it up, but he was maybe synthesizing it into a smoother narrative.
Well, I know an author who did something like this. It's a book called Hits and Misses.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that it says Hits and Misses, a novel. But it does incorporate real life events that actually did happen. But the book is well, positioned as being a novel. So
there's a difference
right up there. And I can't remember who wrote it. Might have been
somebody.
Dr. Karen Stolzner, maybe.
Thank you for the plug, as always.
But I want to add so that does happen, but you don't then take that book and say nonfiction.
Yeah, well, I want to add too. It is interesting because you have the supernatural element of the claims, but then you have that tied in with a real historical event. And I think it's interesting in that the movie ends with a note that this true event, this historical event, was never actually explained when it was. So we'll get into that throughout the course of the discussion.
If mystery is the refined sugar that's added to a recipe, then this is a high calorie film. I mean,
Indeed,
I
yeah.
think, but I have to admit that I'm biased because I really like this movie a lot, and
So do
it's like,
we, yeah.
yeah, it's a ride, it's a fun ride, and it did a better job of making this into a super spooky story, which is appropriate for this time of year. As we're recording this, we're
Yes.
coming up on Halloween. Although
Halloween, you can see the pumpkins I have here, and Matt
exactly,
has
I was gonna decorate
something in the
but-
background. Yeah.
he's got a fully engorged great pumpkin back there. So yeah, I
But
go ahead.
His name is Bitey.
oh, no. You say what you're going to say, because I'm going to get into the
yeah. Well, I
the
was just
movie.
I was gonna say the the screenwriter Rich Hatem had a challenge. He found this book in a used bookstore and picked it up, and it was like it just sort of knocked him out. Now he's into this kind of stuff. He's been on Astonishing Legends numerous times. He's been on our show once, maybe twice.
Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
great guest.
Yeah, he's a hoot. He's really plugged into this. He keeps a pretty neutral position on things.
We'll put a link to that episode in the
yeah, that'd be a good
description.
thing to do. I mean, they go long over there. We our shows tend to run hour and a half. There's go for months. So
Yeah.
But I think he was challenged as a screenwriter because the Mothman Prophecies is not a really clear narrative. Like one chapter to the next, you may be looking at sort of like bullet pointed histories of cryptids, or the way that giant birds figure into mythology across cultures. None of that's going to fit into a movie narrative. Like there's not an easy way to make that work. And then when they finally roll into Point Pleasant and start looking at things, one of the big things is this is all taking place during a giant UFO flap, and none of that makes it into the movie or to the screenplay. That's not what this is about. This is more about the Mothman as not even, and it's not even a cryptid movie. It's more of a ultra terrestrial, weird. There's things out there, stranger than we can understand. And I think really that was what Keel was hinting at. So, but let's get into the film.
Yeah, I think Matt and I first saw this movie together maybe about 10 years ago, wasn't it? And I didn't think too much of it at the time, but to watch it a second time, I think I picked up on a lot more and really enjoyed a lot of elements of it. Aside from the script and the topic, I think the camera work was really amazing, and the music was interesting too.
Sound design.
I just had a real sense of being off balance, I think, throughout the whole film, just the way that the camera would approach, the main character played by Richard Gere, and the kind of motif of the eyes, the repetition of the red eyes in just kind of everyday things around everyone. I thought it was just a really good film upon a second viewing years later.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. I mean, you're basically starting off with this couple who is, and you're not really sure, are they married, are they boyfriend, girlfriend, what's the situation? But you find out from seeing the ring on her hand that they are married and they're buying their first house, and everything seems to be going perfectly until they're driving down the road and chatting and laughing and maybe not paying attention to the road as well as they should, when out of nowhere,
you knew something was going to happen.
They built it up. They really were building up something's going to happen. Get ready. And and I couldn't remember, does she die right here? What happens? But and oh, by the way, there may be a spoiler here or there in this.
As always, with based on a true story. It's all about the spoilers.
But suddenly out of nowhere, this winged beast flies right toward the car, and she loses control, smacks her head against the side of the window and breaks it and everything. And it sets things off in a very discombobulating sort of way. They were everything was so happy and going forward so positively that it all comes crashing down, boom, just like that. And she's in a hospital. They find out she has this tumor in her head, and
I think you're never quite sure too if what she has is a product of that encounter, or whether it's something that she had and that creature's appearance was an omen.
But how was the oh, go on, go ahead, Blake.
I was just gonna say there's a lot of ambiguity around all of this, and this is like 20 minutes of the film is establishing that you've got this reporter character, John Klein,
the Washington Post,
from the Washington. He's a WAPO writer. And man, they must make good money because that's a really nice house they're looking at the beginning.
Certainly is, and his car and everything.
Yeah, everything tells you right
Clothing.
off the bat we're in a fantasy here because reporters do not make that much money. But
Indeed, yeah.
it's very disorienting, and it's like you're establishing that this is a guy whose heart is broken, who doesn't know what to do with his life because everything he's planned is out of whack now because of how things turn out with his wife's tumor. And you don't know if the tumor was caused by the events or if the events like let her see things that she wasn't supposed to see. Like you just don't know. You never know. In fact,
she says when she's
special sauce for this film, right?
She says after that happens, something's wrong. Something's happened.
What's wrong with me? I think she says at one point.
Yeah.
Or something's wrong with me. I can't remember her exact dialogue. But then, how was the reveal of her notebook drawings?
I love that. I love it.
Well, it kind of starts off initially because he's alerted to that by the orderly in the hospital or the nurse.
She's drawing angels.
So you see this notebook and it looks like angels at first and they're very rudimentary, but they kind of look happy. But then as he progresses through this notebook, they just become more ominous and more evil and bloody and very scary drawings.
Very desperate drawings even, I think.
And then the music, sort of
and a lot of
crescendoing along with the page turning and everything was nice.
I mean, the sound design and visuals of this film really, like, just when the scenes of him running around in the hospital freaking out are, I mean, if you've ever been in a situation where you're dealing with someone you love in a hospital and you're suddenly just a tiny little cog in a giant machine of healthcare, and maybe the doctors care, but at some level they're just another number, right? I mean, they're just another number. They're just they like, you're just in a system where you're not sure if they're going to pull out of it or not. It's so scary, and I think the film really relays that very well. And it's like, well, it's a horror film, maybe. It's certainly a thought-provoking film. It terrified me when I watched it the first time in a way that the book never did. Just that disorienting, it's a touch of it's what John Keel would call the ultra-terrestrial, like this idea that there's something beyond. It's almost a Lovecraftian movie in that the way it deals with the idea that there's things out there we just can't quite perceive. And you're watching Keel become Klein, not Keel, Klein. You're watching Klein become disoriented as his life crumbles around him. So, yeah.
Oh, and some of the scenes are absolutely horror. I'm jumping ahead at this point.
Yeah.
But the scene where he's anticipating a call from his deceased wife, and the phone starts ringing, and he's just so frustrated and just at the end of his tether, and so he rips the phone out of the wall, and then it continues to ring, and that's really scary. I mean, that's definitely
2002, that's
film
doubly scary. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we were pointing out to our son, that's an old telephone. That's how it's supposed to look. What's that?
So then they time jump for like 2 years later. Yeah. And so the film came out in 2002. So I realized it didn't occur to me at the time when I watched it, but they're talking about 2004. So they're just, your story is not something that's going to interface with the events of 2004, but and so it turns out it worked. It ages well. The film ages well, but
it does.
They are like playing now in the future of 2004. And
just
nothing changes technologically. Kieran, you want to talk us through the teleport?
Yeah. So I think that was a fun scene where he's in Washington DC, where he lives, and he's, I think, driving to a job that they've set him on. I'm not sure exactly where he's going.
Yeah, he's supposed to go interview a governor. Somebody who,
I
think maybe somebody's going to be running for president or something. So some big interview.
Then I think I can't remember exactly what he finds himself lost.
Yeah, his car stops.
His car stops.
That's right.
Stalls out in front of some strange house in the middle of West Virginia.
Yep, and I think his phone goes as well, so he has just no alternative but to pull up to this, to get out and to approach the house. And so I think it's 2:30 in the morning, and he raps on the door, and a guy answers the door and immediately drags him into the house, and he's got a shotgun, or drags him into the bathroom and abuses the crap out of him and threatens to kill him. And then we find out that this guy or Richard Gere has been coming to his house at 2:30 in the morning for the past 2 mornings. But we're not quite sure if that really did happen or if this is a hallucination that this guy is having, because it plays a lot into the plot of this film, and is a reappearing character, and he's experiencing the same kind of thing too. But we end up finding
Gordon Smallwood was his name, and what an unfortunate name.
I can't remember the name of the actor.
That's Will Patton, who plays a lot of good characters. Yeah, he
was great in it.
I'll just hop in and say that Gordon is this sort of interesting, desperate, rural West Virginia character. He's I don't know if they ever explain what he does for a living, but
good Christian folk.
He's
didn't he work down at the plant or something?
He's down at the fire and smoke factory, right?
Yeah.
but he's played as sort of a everyday working guy who's somehow become exposed to a lot of weirdness and doesn't know why. And he seems desperate and confused. And at first he thinks that Richard Gere's character, John Klein, is a villain. And this ties into the intro to the book very interestingly, because in the way they introduced it in the beginning of the novel or book or whatever you want to call it, it's like the devil comes to West Virginia. And it's basically John Keel describing how he had car trouble and was kind of lost, and he stopped at a farmhouse early in the morning asking for directions, and he was wearing a suit and driving a dark car, and so he looks like a mysterious city slicker type character showing up in the middle of the night, and
like Man in Black or something,
right? And these simple country folk probably perceived him as a strange and satanic city slicker devil character, and right. So that whole scene here is playing out basically the same thing. And at the same time, it's also this character of Gordon Smallwood is a proxy for a real person that appears in the book named Woody Derenberger. And Woody is a salesman who has this really strange experience where he's driving down the road and a UFO pulls up beside him, and a guy gets out and explains that he's Indrid Cold from the planet of Lanulos. Now, that becomes in the film, this Indrid Cold character is a super creepy, sinister, recurring character. I love it.
But you don't know. I found it confusing though as to whether he was the Mothman or whether he was a demon, whether he was related or not. I think that they kind of lost the plot in that sense, where it was just getting a bit confusing as to what role the Mothman was playing in this.
Yeah, and I think that disorienting ambiguity is on purpose. I think the whole film is designed to make you leave it unsettled.
Well, they want you to feel the way they think the townsfolk felt.
Yeah.
So not having answers. I mean, you even have Mr. Leak, who is obviously not Keel in reverse.
No.
Saying that it's not for you to know. You're not supposed to know.
I love that too. Or as his literal line is, I think, we're not allowed to know.
We're not allowed to know. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You got it right.
There's so well, it's such an interesting approach to this material. So
I think it's interesting.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
I was going to go back to Gordon. So if you want to make any other points.
Well, I was just going to make a point about Leak. How John Klein is supposed to be sort of John Keel.
Yeah,
but John Keel is also this Leak character.
Yeah, it's like he's divided into two characters.
So yeah, he's kind of I just when I remember when I first saw the movie when it came out, I knew exactly who John Keel was. So when they said Leak, I was like, oh, they couldn't come up with something better than Leak. Just spell his name backwards. No one will know.
He's so important. He needed two characters.
Yeah, but just I really thought they could have come up with maybe a better name, I don't know, like Flanton Streetman. I don't know.
Something more fancy
like that. But anyway, go ahead, Karen.
But I think that Gordon, it's interesting because he keeps talking about how people think he's crazy in the town, but then at the same time we find out that lots of people are having visions or experiences or dreams that they can't explain, and including the town cop. and of course she is there when she comes to, I guess, rescue or to look into the situation to see what's happening, but also to rescue Richard Gere.
Connie Mills.
Yeah.
And becomes a pivotal character in the story.
Yeah, she does. And if there's not a character like Mary Hyre from the book. Mary Hyre was the sort of journalist who was local, who was working a lot with Keel. And so I guess in some sense, she's sort of the proxy for that character.
Yeah, totally.
So she keeps him informed of what the local news stories are around this stuff. But he's a big Washington Post reporter. He's not supposed to be focusing on a small town in West Virginia. He's definitely not supposed to be teleporting. That is right off the list of things he's supposed to be doing. So he's got to kind of come to grips with this strangeness, and he can't resist investigating it. So, and they kind of do some hand waving for how he's able to drop out of this important political coverage to jump into this small town coverage.
I was wondering that too, because it's absolutely not the kind of thing that he would cover in that role. I mean, that's very far afield from that, and it just did seem like he was just given a lot of leeway to pursue what he wanted to, and that wasn't really, he wasn't held accountable for it. It
felt like he was a really good reporter, and they were like, maybe this will help get this out of his system. I don't know.
Well, his wife
you just go do whatever it is you got to do, and then get back here and get to work.
Get back here and get to work, because we'll need you in a couple of weeks. Take your leave. Because I'm certainly he didn't burn through any leave at all while his wife was dying of cancer. So
right,
but later on too, when he makes that mistake in the prediction, he misinterprets the prediction, and he thinks that it's gonna be about the chemical plant exploding. Right. And there's a politician who turns up who I think he's supposed to be involved in reporting on that event. And they kind of insinuate that he's going to pay for this. He's going to suffer
lose his job.
Yeah. So you think at that point that's going to happen, which is what would happen in real life.
It is. Now, keep in mind, this was before Facebook came and destroyed all the newspapers. So, this was a time when it was still early days in the, how are we going to deal with the days internet? Right. Yeah. So now it's like, it's laughable. If you have a job in journalism, good for you, but that's a tough industry. Have you lost your Halloween spirit, Matthew?
Yeah, it's deflated somewhat.
Yeah.
Feeling rather low right now.
Well, this is a good time to talk to our new sponsor, Blue Chew.
Yeah. Nice segue.
Yeah.
So that is intended to be teleportation then that he does. I think he initially thinks that he's is that there could be another Point Pleasant that's in the country, and he thinks it's closer to Washington, D.C., but then he discovers that he's all the way in West Virginia.
This is the closest we get, I think, to UFOs in the episode, because his car dying and the fact that he traveled and has no memory of driving the distance comes down very closely to lost time in UFO lore. So this idea that the aliens can mess with your perception of time. And so did they move him? When I say they, I don't mean space aliens, not in this story. Probably if that had happened to John Keel, which it didn't, this is fictional, then maybe that's how he would explain it. But I'm not sure. I think it goes back to establishing a strong sense of disorientation throughout the whole.
Yeah.
Everything he does in this town feels weird and disoriented.
Well, it's like, when his car and his phone and everything went out, it was very, EMP like.
Yeah, very much so.
Because just anything electronic, boom, dead. So, and that usually tends to be part of, UFO abduction stories or UFO,
I think it was that was Level in Texas was a big part of that, where cars in several places suddenly just stopped and wouldn't crank up while they were in the presence of a UFO. It's pretty common to the UFO lore now.
Yeah,
but it was at the time it would have been. It's just one of those. I think it's coded to imply UFO, but it doesn't mean that here. Really, we never see. I don't think anybody mentions UFOs in the film or aliens.
No, I mean the lights could be a hint to that though at times, but usually, I mean there are the sightings that people have of the demon or the Mothman as well. Like you've got that couple making out in the car, and then they have that experience and they actually see the Mothman. At other times, it's just a set of eyes instead of being a Mothman. But I think that could potentially hint at UFOs.
Yeah, it's definitely there in the historical story for sure. That's I mean, people talk about the Mothman, and we'll, I guess when we're done with this, we'll talk about the real story of the Mothman. But this within this film, it's much more about the ultra terrestrial, which I probably is the thing that's come out of the book that's become the most persistent, really, is this idea that there are things, there's like a dimension or realm just outside of what we can perceive. And that kind of fits into fairy lore, paranormal Bigfoot, which we've talked about before. And this concept of the liminal space where you're kind of in between worlds. Like in the film, I think the whole city, the whole town feels like it's a liminal space where anything could happen at any time. And so Keel, in addition to dealing with all these people seeing the red eyes, also there's this haunting sub-story or subtext story about, or maybe it's a B plot, where he thinks maybe his wife's trying to communicate to him. And so, you know, she's dead, but like the story does sort of get into that. Is that really her trying to communicate to him, or is it those creatures manipulating him? You know, so, and that.
Right. And then there's that sighting later in the movie too, where he walks past her. And then we find out that she'd paid a visit to the cop and was asking questions, strange questions like, is he happy? And things like that. And yet she does look different enough too. In some scenes, she's depicted as having kind of wavy hair or straight hair. But in that scene towards the end, she has very curly hair. So I think that they've made her look different enough that, you know, is she still alive on some other plane? You know, is this a different version of her or something that he's trying to reach? This
is she's played by Deborah Messing. So she's I think that becomes a big question in the film, is whether Richard Gere is going to engage with either her or these things by trying to actually talk to her, because they keep manipulating. They tell him, go back to your house and we'll call you. You know, she's totally going to call you. It's really going to happen.
Well, she's a constant presence in the film. And I mean, he's carrying around that picture of her, and then he has that experience as well where he wakes up and she's beside him, and she speaks to him but doesn't move her lips. So it's some kind of mental telepathy.
Yeah.
So that was creepy.
It was.
Well, and the thing is that to me really said that this is not her, is her words are, I just want you to be happy. If she wanted him to be happy, she had stopped tormenting him and following him around and just to say, I just want you to be happy.
Let him hook up with the cop.
Yeah, let him hook up with the cop.
Which is how things seem to be going. And especially towards the end when she invites him over for Christmas and has bought him a ticket. And I thought that was
very forward. Well, especially when he was so aggressive with her in the scene previous to that. And she clearly was uncomfortable with how aggressive he was and was like, please, you know, out of my house, come to my house. It was that mixed message was a little confusing on what was going on there. But, you know, it seemed to me that it should probably be him mending that particular fence, because he was so aggressive with her and kind of had her pinned and she couldn't go anywhere. And it was really, you know, especially in the age of Me Too, that was just really uncomfortable to watch, you know, him overpower her in that sense.
But I think, again, it was another one of those things, just keeping a soft balance and really showing the progression of his madness.
Yeah. He's got this obsession with learning what's going on and trying to understand it. And if there's a message in the movie, I think maybe more than anything, it's we can't understand this stuff. And that's an interesting approach. I mean, and I think that kind of points metaphorically at the sort of problem that skeptics have when we examine this. You know, there's a limit to what you can test and prove and understand it. And outside of that limit, right. And without those constraints, you're stuck with, well, I can't test it to figure out if it's really true. So my options are believe in the unbelievable or just say, I don't know. And saying I don't know is hard for a lot of people, but I think it's probably the most honest.
Should
it's
do.
what they should do. Yeah, exactly. It's
what
like
we try to do here at Monstertalk.
Yeah, we do. And I think, it's famously, I think like Joe Nickel, for example, gets kind of dinged around because he likes to try to find natural explanations for things. So he thinks that what people saw in the Mothman case was a barred owl, not a barn owl, but a barred owl. And it closely matches, the sort of descriptions. In fact, if you look at the novel or the book, a lot of it is about birds and giant birds and the culture around birds. And so, like, if you see Mothman today, you typically see a guy with arms and legs and wings and big red eyes. But the original description was about it was a bird creature. It was very much a bird-like creature. And the reason
do you have any like physical depictions of it that we could possibly see?
Probably the most accurate.
Oh, that is so cool.
It is. This is a sculpt by a listener of the show, Jean Saint Jean. I don't know if that's actually how you pronounce his name, but that's how it's spelled. And he has a 3D sculpting studio where he makes these kind of things. He makes Bigfoot and all kinds of cool cryptids. And he's got this moth. And if you'll notice, though, this is very accurate because for the original description, there's no arms. Like it's got wings and legs. Yeah. It's a humanoid. And look, he's like lovingly put in pieces of the silver bridge. It's really, really well done. It's a great sculpt. Highly recommend. And then like here's one that I got more recently. Also a Mothman. You can tell from the
much
eyes.
More demonic.
But notice it's arms
like it's got
and
horns,
legs.
or
It's a hexapod. Yeah.
Huh.
These are supposed to be antennae. But it's got the big red eyes, and it's I like it. It's
little Pazuzu like, actually. It's
but it's cool though, because when it rests, it uses its wings as a resting point. I don't know if you can see that, but that's kind of neat.
Nice touch.
And hauling all that around, you need a rest.
Yeah. What?
Occasionally.
Oh.
Anyway.
What? Sorry, no.
I said hauling all that around, you occasionally need a rest.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I missed what you said initially. But I guess we should talk about some of the claims too, because they do come into the movie, not as much as they do into the real life events. But
should we wrap up the film though? I mean, like ultimately he's seeing these prophecies. Or he thinks that the Mothman is telling him something. In fact, I think it's Leek tells him that these things can see a little further into the future, which I love that metaphor.
It was a great metaphor.
Yes.
The window washer up on the side of the building.
It's like it's not that it has power over the future. It's just that from its position, it could see a little further down the road. That's really cool.
That was really good.
Said.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. But he begins to believe that there's going to be some big event that's what's going to happen, and that parallels
which he
very
initially
closely.
thinks is going to be the chemical plant exploding.
Exactly. And
something
then ultimately
taking place on the Ohio River.
Yeah, and ultimately it does turn out to be an event on the river, but not what he expected. So in the movie, he basically keeps toying with the idea of trying to talk to his wife, even though he's suspicious it might not really be her. And ultimately, he decides to reject their offers and go back to town to go see his sheriff cop lady. And then that's when we get to the big conclusion, which is the collapse of the bridge that crosses the Ohio River. And this is based on a real event. This is the collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which was a terrible tragedy. And Keel was there. Keel was there documenting these Mothman and UFO stories when suddenly this ginormous human tragedy happens.
And if you're a paranormal investigator, how can you not see that as paranormal?
Yeah, well, and again, Keel had already become convinced that the Mothman was predicting the death of the Pope. He thought the Pope was going to be assassinated in some way. And so that's what he expected to happen. And instead, that doesn't happen. And instead, we get this Silver Bridge collapse. And he's like, how did I mess this up? How did I misunderstand everything?
Well, and you had Leek earlier in the film basically foreshadowing that whole thing. I misinterpreted this, and it got me in a lot of trouble.
So it makes for a very good narrative in the movie. And in the book, it doesn't, honestly, it's not as impressive, because I don't think Keel makes as good of a case. And he wasn't really the first to cover this either, by the way. Gray Barker, who we probably have talked about before, I believe we have, who's another classic UFO investigator and writer. he had written a book in early 1970, I think, called The Silver Bridge, which postulated that there was a connection between Mothman and this event. And then it took Keel a few more years. I think it was 75 before he got his book out. But both of them talk about the idea that the Mothman is a predictor of these events. And they also are both heavily into UFO lore. So it's not out of nowhere. And I think between the two of them, in fact, Gray Barker's book has even more fictional element. He makes it kind of almost like an autobiographical thing. He was a closeted gay man, and there's some stuff in there about that kind of element, going on in that. But I think Keel's book has had a bigger footprint on that paranormal culture. So
yeah,
I am disappointed that when Bitey was falling down back here, that nobody said, including myself, must have a leak.
yeah.
That is that's
little late, but yeah, still
missed it. Anyway, I'll figure something out there. But yeah, I think that
maybe
overall,
you need a pump, Ken.
But the
go ahead, Karen.
I was gonna kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about the
shift gears.
sightings.
Well done.
Oh yeah. Well, that actually was not intentional. But what were we gonna say?
I was going to talk, just kind of wrap up the movie aspect of it, and talk about how much it was a good movie. We really did enjoy it. We got a lot of scares out of it, and it's one of those things where didn't ever, I don't know, Blake, if you ever saw anything about the Denver crash for the 99 dead,
right.
But I couldn't find anything on that. A lot of the things in the movie I could not find any support for, other than they're supported by Keel's book. That's the only actual, in Keel's book it says blah blah blah. So what supports that? It's a lot of things that have no support. So it does not seem like you can't call this a true story. You just can't. But the movie was one of the better movies that we've actually gone through on this show. So I really enjoyed it.
I found it. I mean, again, I'm a jaded mofo at this point in my life, but I really, especially back then at the time, it really hit a lot of great emotional buttons for me. Like it was, I mean, consider this 2002, as a nation, we were still kind of reeling from the effects of September 11th.
Right. Yes.
It captures the weirdness of all of this paranormal stuff in a way that the reality rarely does. And so to be inspired by a book that's good, but largely disjointed, and make something that's a little smoother. This is basically like a liqueur. It's a distillation of the better parts of the John Keel book into something that's fictional, but captures the spirit of it very well. So I don't think like slapping the inspired by true events or based on a true story, or this is based on real events, is a disservice to the tragedy of the people who died in the real events of the Silver Bridge. But it just as far as based on a real book, it does a great job of making a better experience. I mean, people came out of this film terrified of Indrid Cold, right? If you go read the real book, The Mothman Prophecies, or read Woody Derenberger's book about Indrid Cold, it's not scary. It's campy. It's just not scary. It's really, I keep bringing it back into the nudist basketball, volleyball kind of movies of the 50s. It's weird, tinfoil hat kind of UFO visitors and contactee stuff. It doesn't come across as very serious or terrifying. This film creeped me out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, us too. And I think we should talk a little bit about the actual Silver Bridge collapse too, because that's the component in the movie and in the book which is real, which did actually happen.
Well, and let's explore that for just a moment. Other than stuff that the book claims that aren't backed up, are there other things in this movie that were real? Other than we know John Klein was there, we know that Mary was there. We know that John Keel was there, not John Klein, but John Klein's character, and we know right off the top, he wasn't married, so there was no Mary.
There's no dead wife, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there was no wife. And he doesn't really seem like a wife type.
I think Keel had girlfriends, but
Mhm.
I don't. He as far as I know,
I didn't mean in that sense.
Yeah,
I meant more in
this tragic loss or any of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't, he doesn't come across as ever really having had a relationship of that magnitude. So
well, it makes him more human, honestly, because if you just look at Keel's life, he's kind of a weirdo. I mean, he's an interesting guy.
I was trying to tiptoe around that word.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I was.
We've encountered that type in the paranormal and skepticism before.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be married to someone obsessed with the paranormal, investigating weird stuff. It's just,
I know.
How would you even get along with somebody
I don't
like
know
that?
anybody like that. Lord. But yeah, I mean, we had all these people had their eye affected in some way.
Yes.
So
yeah, that was
in the
book to see.
Yeah, it was. It's uncomfortable in that sense, but it was in the book. But
Absolutely.
do we have any evidence that ever actually happened?
No, and that was, I think, in the book, that was Mary Hyer's niece was the first person that came up with that kind of. It's got a special name, but it was like a kind of conjunctivitis, and it
looked like conjunctivitis.
Yeah, Keelig or something.
Or like
it's caused by radiation, they say, like, or being exposed to bright infrared.
Keelig conjunctivitis.
Yeah.
Okay. It also looked like a burst blood vessel.
I might dub me back in saying that properly. I will see.
Make sure your mouth doesn't sync up.
I think we should, talk a little bit about the tragedy, and also talk a bit about some of the claims of Mothman and how that plays into the story and the movie and the book as well. But the Silver Bridge collapse. So this did actually happen, and it happened December 15th, 1967. And it was during rush hour when people were traveling back, I think, from Christmas shopping or coming back from work, and the bridge collapsed. I mean, the technical explanation for it is that there was a defect in a steel pin eye bar that was improperly manufactured, and the thing just gave way. And apparently the bridge collapsed in under a minute. The whole thing collapsed, fell into the water, and I think about 90% of it was submerged after the accident. And
I want to break in just real quickly. Now, Karen and I watched a long documentary that was on nothing but the manufacture of bridges at this time.
Yeah, it was like a structural engineering show for.
So now
Open
we know
University.
way too much about these bridges. But the thing is these particular bridges, this one and the what was it?
The second bridge, and I can't.
Yeah, the second bridge was the last
one.
name of the guy who actually built it,
Carpenter.
Carpenter. That's
Carpenter
it.
Bridge.
Carpenter Bridge. They were built the same way, but the thing is they were manufacturing steel in a slightly different way, and they thought that they could use a lot less of it. Not the first bridges that were designed this way had 1.5 times what they needed. So really, you had all this time that the bridge could degrade before it even got to the point of being where it should be. So with these ones, they didn't do that. They made everything smaller and used a lot less materials. And it's this really slender, slim, fancy looking bridge. It was very sleek.
Think of the savings.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But and unfortunately, 46 people weren't saved. But it really was, they really thought they were doing a great thing with this engineering by trimming everything down so much.
Yeah.
But there was now a lot more weight on a lot less support.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, it was sorry.
I was going to say, thanks, Lois Bitter. Yeah.
So it was built in 1928, and so back in those days they didn't quite have the trucks and the heavy vehicles that you had in the 60s. And it seems like there was, at that point, they didn't do any kinds of safety inspections. That just wasn't a thing. And so when this accident took place, the load on the bridge was just way too high, more cars than it should have ever been holding. And it just hit that kind of tipping point and gave way. And as Matt said, there were 46 deaths and about 9 people who were injured, 2 people who were never found. Yeah, it was really tragic. In comparison, in the movie, there were 36 deaths.
Yeah, they didn't want it to be as many deaths for some reason. I don't know really what the difference would have been.
Not too sure, but Connie was going to be number
37.
And so she'd had that dream, which she relayed earlier in the movie, where she'd seen the presence in the water and she felt herself drowning and just giving into that, and was then pulled back with wake up number 37. So that's played again at the end of the movie. But it was a really tragic event with this bridge going, and this actually resulted in improved security and safety standards for bridges. So from that point onwards, they would do, I think, annual safety inspections of bridges.
Structural inspections.
So we really learnt from that tragedy. And hopefully nothing like that will happen again. But it was the biggest tragedy of its kind, the biggest tragedy regarding bridges at that point in American history.
And you brought up a great point about them not predicting the increase in weight that vehicles would ultimately have. And that would be a hard thing to predict, sure. But on top of that fact, you had the time of year. So there was a lot of extra traffic going back and forth over the bridge. Yeah. And
apparently
also,
it was the coldest day of the year as well.
Coldest day of the year. That was another big issue. And the traffic lights were malfunctioning all day long, causing huge traffic backups. That actually did happen. That was something that was in the film, but it actually did happen as well.
So again, extra cars that were on the bridge.
Yeah. So there was, and all day long, there was more weight on that bridge than normal. On the coldest day of the year.
Seems super on point for like our current cultural narrative in the country about infrastructure and the importance of supporting it. Like, so much of our infrastructure now was built in the 1950s, kind of this is Eisenhower era stuff. And it gets inspected, but even if the inspection says it needs fixing, who's fixing it? And that's, so I unfortunately, every now and then we have these massive, collapses or tragedies that were entirely preventable if people spent the money to fix the stuff. So,
right.
And it's like frequently it's a matter of, man, that would have been a good thing to have spent money on had we done so, and that doesn't bring anybody back from the dead. So.
And you have to wonder, would they even seen it? Because that small crack that worsened throughout that day was hidden. Behind other steel.
Well, in the fatalities, I mean, the water being cold didn't help anything either. But your time to live in near freezing water is minutes. So that's assuming you can get out of your car. So it's a very serious, scary tragedy. So, and I thought really dramatically represented, even though the numbers were different and a few other things, that it's probably the most frightening representation of the collapse that I've seen on film. So,
yeah.
Oh yeah, anything like that. I remember decades ago when part of the Bay Bridge in the Bay Area fell during an earthquake. I mean, anything like that is just terrifying. The combination of ocean and bridge collapsing and drowning is just really frightening. So that was definitely another horror part.
Oh, this is, by the way, this is one of my like recurring deep fears, is going off a bridge and not being able to get out of the car. It's like
mine too.
Terrified.
Oh yeah.
Well, that and Titanic was a horror movie for me. When Titanic started going down.
Every time I think about having to be naked and drawn by Leo, it just the shivers.
You wake up in a cold sweat every time.
I think what people might be asking at this point is, what's the connection between this true tragedy and Mothman? And
Mothman doesn't make that many appearances in here, does he?
No, but in real life, in the true story, in that area, there were sightings of Mothman for 13 months prior to this event taking place. And then it said that those sightings completely ceased. So it appears as though the Mothman was heralding this tragic event and then disappeared. And Matt and I were discussing this a bit last night and thinking that really, if you have a tragedy of this magnitude, you're not going to be talking about the paranormal. And of course, it's been construed as, well, Mothman did what he was supposed to do to tell people warn people of this impending event, which he didn't really do very clearly. If we look at,
yeah, you can tell the guy that the watch is in his
claims,
shoe under the bed, but he can't.
he can't be
say these
precise
lies.
about
It's
stay away from this bridge at
Mothman
this time.
in interviews since this event. Mothman stands there smoking cigarette. Man, I did my best. I tried.
I
tried to tell them. They just didn't listen to me. It's like, I gave them the red eyes. How is that not clear? Clearly, red eyes, bridge collapse. If you can't figure this out, I've done my part. So
yeah. I mean, that's a conclusion you'd make just walking down the street. I mean, that's obvious. Yeah. But
basically, the claim is that he did his job, and then he moved on, and that's why the sightings continued around the country, in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and that's now why we're having those continued sightings, particularly in Chicago.
Well, but the thing is Chernobyl was another one where there were supposedly some Mothman sightings beforehand, and they ceased immediately afterwards.
Wait a minute. Chernobyl, Chicago,
Point
Pleasant.
Exactly. It all falls together. So we need to be watching out for Chikennesaw.
That's right. But
Denver.
The excuse me. In the book, it opens up with Keel talking about the year of the Garuda, this giant bird from Indian mythology, and it's all about giant birds, pterodactyls, human-sized birds, man birds. Like, that's a recurring theme through the book, and the witnesses would see this bird or this bird-like creature, and you would think it would be called, Birdman. But it's not. And that's all because one newspaper reporter tied it in with Batman 66 and thought that Mothman sort of fit in with the Batman kind of theme. Why
moth? Nice alliteration there too.
It's got the
Mothman.
MM. I don't know. It's very unclear why that caught on, but man, it caught on, and suddenly everybody was calling it Mothman. Yeah.
Well, the big statue that they have there is got
the silver metallic one.
Yeah, it's got moth wings, and it's got
also
2 arms and legs.
Also has 2 arms and 2 legs. The hexapod. Yeah.
But it has sort of bird head.
Yeah. It's a very interesting piece of sculpture. I'd love to go see it sometime.
Yeah.
All the depictions seem to be a little bit different based on whatever the people who saw it were exposed to. But it is interesting how often we've seen that there'll be one article, one coverage of an incident, and then that particular description or that name really takes off and becomes the lore.
Now, was it Warner Brothers cartoons that had that monster that
like it's like a Yeti, but it looks like a big shape, like a big shoulders, and doesn't have wings, but very much similar. I
think it's very Mothman-esque, and just wonder which came first.
Oh, the Warner Brothers for sure. I think that one's from the 50s.
Yeah, I think so. But that's all you have to do is slap on some dark sort of wings behind it, and
his name's Gossamer. From Hair Raising Hair, 1946. Though, when I think of gossamer, I usually think of silk, like gossamer threads on a spider
material,
web, which also could be used to describe moth silk. Yeah, I think there's there's definitely a tie in there. It's all connected
there. Yeah.
Back on the actual tragedy of the bridge, there was a woman who was a survivor of that, and she was talking about her harrowing experience on that bridge as it collapsed. And she had pulled onto the bridge, and she saw up ahead kind of what was going on, and she threw the car in reverse. She was feeling
the wobbling of the bridge
feeling it moving. She throws a car in reverse, and the car starts to go and then stalls.
Oh no.
And it has just enough momentum to carry her back, so her front tires are just on the ledge of where it fell in front of her.
Yeah. Terrifying.
Wow. And I really think that they should have had that in the movie, some character that we're familiar with or something in the movie having that experience, because wow, that would have been terrifying.
Well, the only other thing that I thought was really big in the book that they didn't at least allude to is that both the Gray Barker book and the John Keel book also incorporated the Men in Black into the story.
Yes, heavily.
Yeah, and so that doesn't really happen here. There's enough weirdness. There's plenty of weirdness in this film.
They couldn't fit it all in.
Yeah, it would have been hard to cram that in too. But that was like a recurring thing. Keel's doing his investigation, and he keeps running into people who are like, well, they told me not to talk to you. Well, who told you not to talk to me? Those gentlemen, the weird Oriental looking, that's not my words, his words. They kept talking about these strange Oriental looking people who were wearing black suits. And that seemed to be like a recurring thing, that somehow this idea that they had slightly almond shaped eyes was, tied them into being aliens somehow. So, but that was a recurring theme. And Barker really, and Alfred Albender, I think it's Albender, were the two sort of progenitors of the Men in Black story. And then of course Keel picked it up as well. And I couldn't help but think when I was reading the book that you had all these UFO investigators going around because of the UFO flap in the area. This is the Ohio River Valley area. They were having a lot of UFO activity, that people dressing nice to look like, effectively they're cosplaying. You never see this now where people are cosplaying as investigators, but they were cosplaying as UFO investigators for various, civilian fan agencies, and, criticizing each other's work. And it's like, it really seems like a lot of the Men in Black might have just been, rival UFO groups, criticizing each other. So
that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, so what did we think overall? How'd everything play for you guys? I mean, is it a true story?
Not so much.
It certainly includes elements of history and of truth, but it's a fun movie to watch, and just in and of itself is a great film. But not entirely based on a true story.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an accurate depiction of history, but in many ways it captures the feel of the flavor of what Keel was trying to describe better than anything, including Keel's own book. I think,
screenplay was very well done.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
All right.
Okay,
well,
cool.
Everybody, I was just gonna say, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Based on a True Story, and let's talk about next time.
Yes, we do need to figure out what film we're going to talk about next time. And Matt, you had an idea?
Well, I had two. I mean, we were going to talk about doing that Monstertalk Live on possession. Should we do the exorcism of Emily Rose sort of alongside that? Or if that's just too much compressed there. I was also thinking that we can get back to a little bit of a monster theme and do Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Ooh, I would love to do Brotherhood of the Wolf, but I really do want to watch. I have still not watched the Exorcism of Emily Rose.
You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, it is really a good movie, especially comparatively to so much that we've seen. If you want to compare it to that Turkish Exorcist movie, they're like neck and neck with
my God, that's it. I do want to see it, but I was so depressed because I had read, when the film came out, I had read a bunch about the Annalise and Michelle story, and I was like, I don't know if I could take it. So well, I think we should do that, have a month of possession for November. All right.
And we should do two topics, and we can look at the was it Brotherhood of the Wolf for maybe December.
Hey, goodbye. Be sure to follow us or support us at patreon.com/Monstertalk. And again, like and subscribe to all our YouTube stuff, and love us and worship us. That's all we ask.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.